Hello and welcome to episode 332 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and it's great to be back again talking about Suikoden again, but this time specifically Suikoden the First, a game that has been on our list of games to maybe play for the podcast for years and years, but we decided to play the Suikoden games in the order that they were meant to be played, which is 2, 5, 3, 1. That is, of course, a joke. That is just the order that we somehow decided to play them in. And for each of those podcasts, we've had a wildly different panel. But what's the panel for this playthrough of Suikoden 1 for Retro Encounter? Let's introduce them, starting with Jono Logan.
Hello, everyone.
And Zach
Welcome back,
Wilkerson. Well, thanks, Jono.
A surprise to no one, I am here.
And joining Jono, Zach, and I is Cory Tischbein.
Hey there.
Jono, Cory, Zach, we have all different levels of familiarity with this game and this series. Zach, tell us a little bit about your Suikoden background.
So I originally played Suikoden 1, not on release, because I didn't get a PlayStation until maybe 2 or 3 months after Final Fantasy VII came out. But I think it was the third RPG I played after I played Final Fantasy VII, after like Wild Arms, and then I think I played this. And I remember really liking it, but I have played it so many times since then. The first time I played it, I didn't even know like 108 stars were a thing, and so I just played it. And you know there are consequences for that. And then I played Suikoden 2, and I found out like, oh, you need all 108 to get like the best character in Suikoden 2. I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'll go back and play Suikoden 1 now. Then I did that immediately, and then I played Suikoden 2 again immediately because I like Suikoden 2 that much. But I've played them all. I've played Suikoden 1 and 2 no fewer than 10 times a piece. I love these games. Coming off of some of the games I played recently, I was even more impressed with this one. It's the economy of storytelling. But yeah, I played a lot of Suikoden.
Yeah, economy of storytelling is another way of saying this game is a little old school and stuff happens real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Almost at a breakneck pace. And, maybe we should be a little bit informative to the audience. This is Suikoden 1. It's one of the first RPGs that came out for the PlayStation, came out in mid-1995 in Japan. And if you can name the two older PS1 RPGs than Suikoden, I'll Venmo you $5, because I was surprised to learn this. Any takers?
Gosh.
Beyond the Beyond, and I don't know. I have no idea.
It's Beyond the Beyond, which is the first PlayStation 1 RPG, and Kingsfield 2, which is that From Software before they became the Soul Studio. But and Beyond the Beyond, is, I've said many times, is probably my least favorite JRPG. Like I played that game at a sleepover many years ago, and we were all excited for Final Fantasy VII coming out in 8 months or whatever the time was, and I felt betrayed by by a genre I had recently fallen in love with by the end of the evening. But this is not a Beyond the Beyond podcast. I don't know if we'll ever do that one. This is a Suikoden podcast. Suikoden is from Konami, back in the days when they made video games. Suikoden translates to water margin in Japanese. Water margin is a very famous Chinese work of literature and is about 108 heroes defeating a warlord. More complicated than that, I know. And so a lot of the concepts from the Chinese novel Water Margin made it to this RPG, which is not an adaptation of the novel. It's its own thing. But it has, the 108 heroes coming together for a common cause, and this sort of with them, a lot of the thrust of the story being the gathering of the heroes. It's sort of the vibe that Suikoden creates. It has all these big ideas for an RPG of things like nation building and corruption and being a liberation army rather than just saving the world from a vaguely supernatural threat. It's a real military threat with supernatural elements surrounding it.
It feels very grounded.
Yeah, but the thing to me about Suikoden is building your army, building your castle, sort of gathering everyone together. And Suikoden 1 distills that feeling into a pretty brisk experience. And Zach already talked about his Suikoden background. I'll go into mine. I sort of knew about Suikoden for years and years, didn't really play it at all. Well, I tried Suikoden 1 and 3 at different times from rentals, but didn't get far into either until I finally played Suikoden 2 for the podcast in 2018. Loved it. Played Suikoden 3 for the podcast in 2021. really liked it, not as much as Suikoden 2. And now I decided, all right, let's go back in time a little bit and play Suikoden 1. And then maybe next year we can do a podcast on Eiyuden 100 Heroes, as it's, for a bit of a Suikoden coda. And but now that I'm in it, I really, really like Suikoden. I loved 2, and now playing this and seeing some of the characters from Suikoden 2 makes me kind of want to replay Suikoden 2, even though it's been less than 4 years. But Cory, you're like me, you're also a relative Suikoden newcomer. What's been your early impressions of it so far?
So far, I'm pretty impressed. I'm about a third of the way through the game, but there are a number of interesting systems that work pretty well together. It's kind of an ambitious game. It's grounded and it definitely has an economy of storytelling, but it also sets up a lot of interesting systems that later titles iterate on. So far, my biggest takeaway from the game is that I'm really digging the recruitable characters mechanic. I like running into characters, recruiting them, and then watching them contribute to the operations at the headquarters. I always enjoyed base building mechanics that add to a sense of progression, but it's really strong here.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then building on what I think it was Zach's economy of storytelling idea, this game is super breezy. It centers around what seems to me to be like a pretty fast paced loop of like quests, dungeons, boss fights, new towns, and you rinse and repeat. You're never really doing the same thing for very long. You're never really stuck in the same place for too long. So I've not been bored at all. And there's a lot of momentum underlying everything. Like maybe too much momentum. Like it's kind of like a faster paced version of Final Fantasy IV in my mind. But so far I'm liking it a lot.
Yeah, I don't think I've sat in a dungeon for longer than 20 minutes. Like the game has a lot of RPG trappings that we're used to, checking out towns, talking to the right people, getting the event flag set up, doing a dungeon fighting a boss. But like you said, Cory, you're not doing one thing for very long in this game, and sometimes the plot points hit you so fast that it seems maybe not overwhelming, but just like a whoa, that just happened a little fast. When maybe we're used to a slower pace of storytelling. If you're like me and played dozens of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games before your first Suikoden game, but but this game is always rewarding you. That you're seeing people all the time that are joining your army, or if you talk to someone with a portrait, then you'll feel in the back of your mind, oh, I bet I can recruit them later, and you probably can. And this game's always rewarding you for just doing a tiny bit more exploring, and sort of centers that reward feedback loop on finding more characters, building your base, which is just really satisfying. I think I've recruited between 30 and 35 characters so far. I'm probably just a little bit ahead further than you are in the game, Cory. But I'm really enjoying every moment of it. And is this your first Suikoden game? I think that's a yes, but I forgot to ask.
Yeah, I guess I'm the polar opposite of Zach. Before playing Suikoden for this podcast, I've never played any of the entries. I remember learning about them and hearing about them a long, long time ago. But before the 2010s, I mean, all I really knew about the series was that it had this character recruitment mechanic that was pretty robust. And so I've been itching to play it for a long while now. And this podcast was perfectly timed for
I read about Suikoden 1 and 2 mostly on gaming forums in the early 2000s. Then I rented the first one and it didn't connect with me. But then, giving it an appropriate time and finally playing it in my decades later, now I'm really really digging it. And when we played Suikoden 2 a couple years ago, I did not play Suikoden 1 ahead of time. I just went right into 2 and I had a good time. But now that I'm seeing the story connections, I see how Zach has it right. It's very rewarding playing 1 and 2 in succession. That's what Alana did for this Weekend in 2 podcast. And again, that was the right call. But Jono, you have this is not your first time playing Suikoden. What's your Suikoden background and experience like?
I don't remember the first time I've heard about the game. Presumably, I saw something about it in Game Players magazine. But I do remember I rented it from Abercrombie Video. Probably, I really liked it, but it was a rental, so I ain't going to be able to beat Suikoden in a weekend. I think I rented it a few times probably, but it wasn't until I got like when game FAQs came out, that was probably the point where I actually was able to play through the entire game. and I really, really liked it. And obviously, I went from there to Suikoden 2 and adore that game. It's probably one of the best PlayStation games ever made. Um, Certainly one of the best RPGs. I like this game a lot. I don't have really anything super critical to say about it. I have critiques, as I think we all do, which we'll be talking about. But yeah, it's a solid game. It's a lot of fun. The base building mechanics are cool, not just because you get additional functionality out of like uh, stores and things like that, but you also get to see certain areas your castle build up with like a sense of community, like certain groups of people band together into various areas of your castle. So like families, for example, or like former Imperials kind of get their own little tower, and I really like that. That's a nice thing to see as you play it. I think it's an amazing foundation for a game series, which has done some remarkable things and some not remarkable things, but we're not talking about those games,
And
at least
you're
not now.
like talking about how the different kinds of characters group up together. That represents itself in gameplay also. This game has unite attacks, which are similar to dual text or triple text from Chrono Trigger, where characters of that have some kind of relationship or connection can do like super attacks simultaneously, and some of the unite attacks are hella strong. You can get a lot of mileage out of the Tier Kai master student attack.
That's the
And
best attack in the game. It just clears out mobs like instantly.
yeah, and the maybe my favorite one is the one that one that the bandits get. Oh, Zach, what are the names? I can't remember them for the life of me.
It's Varkas inside of.
Yeah, Varkas and Sidonia, which start out as a boss you fight earlier in the game. Then you sort of do them dirty by sending them to prison. Then you free them from prison. Then they join your army later and have an awesome double unite attack. And I was a little bit mad at myself when the game forced me to replace one of them in my party at a later stage because one thing that goes hand in hand with the character recruiting in this game and the sort of brisk pace of the plot is that there's always people coming and going. Like you'll do a side quest, 4 people will join you. On the next side quest, you're required to bring these 3 people along. They'll meet more people there, but you still have the freedom to choose about 2 or 3 of your
Yeah.
6-person party. It's just there's always there's always a revolving door of people that encourage experimentation with things like unite attacks and different weirdos, individual runes and weapons. I tried bringing on the cook for us for a round of side questing, and turns out he sucks. But then I brought both fishermen along, and it turns out their unite is strong as hell, but stuns both of them afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both a weakness and a strength of this game, that it forces you to switch people out. And like, I'm like, please let me leave Gremio at home. Oh my
I
goodness.
wish I could leave him at home. He is
Yeah,
so average.
Well,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can.
Average is a nice way of putting it. But yeah, I have more to say about Gremio in part 2 in particular. But the thing that I like about it though is like you can see them learning from that experience in 2 through 5. And especially by the time you get to 5, like you can just throw them in your convoy. Like they don't have to be part of your party. Like they can still be there, but they don't have to fight. They're just there. But yeah, in Suikoden 1, like the volume of times I had to use, like there's a time you have to use a thief that is like totally garbage in battle later in the game. And I'm like,
Oh
what?
no.
Like,
Is there someone I should be leveling up now? Because
nah,
I
this game is so easy, like it doesn't
all right,
matter.
yeah. Again, I think I've had a frontline die have an unlucky critical hit and not get experience from the boss, and that's the most
Yeah,
stress I've ever had in this
that's
game.
that you've essentially experienced the most stress you'll experience in this game. It's not hard. Like there is one time when you fight 2 boss battles in a row, like late. I struggled with that a little bit this time because I didn't pay attention at all to anything that was happening because this game's so easy. But point is that I like seeing them improve on things like the party members you have to bring with you. Like Nanami is annoying to bring with you a lot, but at least she's a slightly more useful. By the time you get to 5, like Leon, who is like the version of Gremio and Nanami, is actually busted, and she always has to be in your party, and that's awesome, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
So
at least Nanami was fast and like the best
yeah,
item user in the game.
yeah, I
Gremio is
throw a
just
water rune on her, and she's excellent.
Yeah, she's the best medicine user in the game, and I've used so many medicines in this game. Like
Yeah.
they give you so many healing items that I don't think I've had to buy a single one. Um, and I have, like, as long as you find a couple characters you like and keep your weapons sharp, then you're mostly okay. Like
Mhm.
your basic RPG instincts will serve you well here. It's like just use magic judiciously, watch your AP, and I'm sorry, watch your HP. If the magic system is based on ranks, which is kind of like old school NES Final Fantasy 3,
Mhm.
but mostly works. And I really dig it. Like, this game feels dated, but not bad. So the part of me that loves RPGs from 1995 is right at home. Uh, but Cory, this is your first time playing the game, and again, you definitely resonated with the character recruiting and castle building, as all of us have. Have you found a couple favorite characters that you like having around the most?
So far I've been playing around with, I think it's Leo. Well, she's got good magic attack. I've been using her a lot. Um, I've struggled with Gremio. I mean, he's just stuck in my party, as y'all said, and he, I think I would call him less than average.
Yeah, but who will protect
Yeah.
young master if he's not there?
Ooh.
Yeah, I wonder if Tyr is a Waka young master or a Goshujin master. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I think, not to jump into criticism too heavily too early, the characters, you don't really learn a whole lot about them. So I don't feel a particular attachment to any of them quite yet. Maybe that'll change as the game goes on. But in battle, I've been using, unfortunately, Gremio a lot, Cleo, Tyr, of course, Look, Luck. I don't know how to say
Oh,
that name.
Luke. Yeah.
Luke. Um, they're pretty solid as well. Those are the four that stick out to me.
Luke is in the first 3 Suikodens. I don't wanna talk about him too much because that might spoil something for you, but he's always like, "Oh, Luke's my party, great, now I have good wind magic the whole rest of the game." Um, and,
Or gate runes if you're
oh,
playing
yeah, oh, yeah,
Suikoden
yeah,
2.
yeah, gate, yeah, or, yeah, blue gates in Suikoden 2. Oh,
Oh yeah.
man. Like, you want at least a couple blue gators in that game.
Yeah.
Is there a gate or a blue gate in Suikoden 1? I haven't found
I don't think so. No.
one. Okay, that's too bad. But I'm a little bit frustrated because I think I've had very bad luck finding elemental magic runes in this game. I think the only one I have is Luke's wind rune and the fire rune that they give you for free near the beginning. And I'm just desperate to find a water rune for healing magic or a lightning rune for some more offense. But I think I'm getting one. Wait, no. I did get a lightning rune from Sheena. Yeah, so I'm not finding a steady stream of fancy runes for customization, like I did in Suikoden 2, and also, characters can only equip 1 rune in this game, while in Suikoden 2, they get to equip 1 to their left hand, 1 to their right hand, and 1 to their head, so there's way more customization options per character. But, uh but Suikoden 1 is scratching the itch with its pretty functional battle system and a lot of customization with character loadouts. And I mentioned that characters are sort of always coming and going in my party. Like, for a while, I used the 2 fishermen for a while, and then one quest later. Then for the next set of quests, I'm using the 2 bandits a lot. And then for the quests I recently finished um in the Great Forest with the elf and dwarven villages, I used Pan and Gremio together, and their unite skill made me dislike Gremio a lot less. And also introduced probably my favorite character so far, Valeria, who is just a badass warrior woman, and
Yeah, she's a beast.
that's something I always enjoy in these kind of games. Like, oh, you mean a sword maiden? That's awesome the whole game. Sign me up. But so she's maybe my MVP other than Tyr himself, because let's go into the story a little bit next, because Tyr has instant death magic that works all the time.
It's so good.
It's
so
almost
good.
too good. It doesn't work on bosses, which is totally fair, but basically giving you a delete button for 4 or 5
Yeah.
times per dungeon is
Now
awesome.
you know why I chose Tur in the first pick of the Suikoden draft.
Yeah, spoiler alert for the first 5 minutes of the previous podcast episode. Tur was the number 1 overall pick. I have some regrets about that, about my choices there. I really should have gone with Rena over Emily, but that's not quite here nor there. Um, uh, l- Tyr is good as hell in this game. You get a rune of life and death at, let's say, the 2 hour mark or so, and I haven't unlocked his second spell yet, but I already can't wait because I mean, when I know there's going to be 4 spells and the weakest one is a delete button. Of course I'm excited for the other
I
3.
mean, the level 3 is a delete the whole field spell.
Awesome.
So it's and the level 2 is good. Level 4 hits super hard. Tur is amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy powerful. But now let's get into maybe who Tyr/Tur is. The main character of Suikoden 1 is Tyr or Tur MacDull, who is the son of a general in the Gregminster Empire. Or is it called the Scarlet Moon Empire?
Scarlet Moon is correct. Yeah.
Right, it's the Scarlet Moon Empire with Gregminster at its capital. And so your dad, right at the beginning, is sent away to a far off front of some ongoing conflict, and you're introduced as a junior officer in the Imperial Army. So you and your bodyguards that live at home with you, Pan, Cleo, Ted, and Gremio, become a little miniature squadron, and you're sent to run some errands for the army. You meet a witch named Leknot who shows up in a bunch of other Suikoden games, and her apprentice Luke. And then you're sent to a small town called Rockland, where the mayor is clearly shirking, like is clearly accepting bribes, or sorry, offering bribes, stealing from the populace, and withholding tax. And the officer that's accompanying you to Rockland, like, obviously takes a bribe right in front of you. So it's communicated pretty clearly that you're not exactly living in the land of the good guys right now. The Scarlet Moon Empire is somewhat oppressive to its citizens, and as such, when one of your when you're in that Rockland mission, one of your companions, Ted, is mysteriously able to defeat a monster on his own without anyone's help, and which is strange because Ted is a teenage orphan, and which is definitely suspicious at the time. But when you finish that mission and go back to Gregminster, the officer that was with you reports to his superiors what Ted was doing, and then proceeds to kidnap Ted right in front of you. Then later that night, Ted sprints back to the mansion, said, "Look, we got to get out of here. You need to get out of here. They're after me. Tyr, will you accept this rune on my hand?" And being a good guy and Ted's best friend, say, "Okay, sure, buddy, whatever you need." And suddenly Tyr has the power over life and death that Ted has evidently had for centuries. Ted mentions being alive hundreds of years offhand. He's definitely some form of immortal who had the Soul Eater rune on his hand, making him immortal, but also being surrounded by death at all times. I don't totally understand everything about it yet, but he passes that power on to Tyr, giving you a death spell again right around the maybe the 90-minute mark, let's say. So yeah, this whole game you're on the run from the Empire because Windy, the Emperor's witch advisor, really wants that Soul Eater rune, and that's what kicks off most of the storyline. So what do we think about this fairly action-packed beginning? They use a couple quests to communicate to you how powerful the Empire is and how corrupt it is, and then you're immediately a fugitive on the being chased by the people you thought were your friends from the very start.
I mean, the thing that struck me most, and maybe this is because I literally just played Tales of Arise, which does the opposite of this, is as I said earlier, the economy of storytelling. Like, I feel like I was invested in just a couple of conversations between Ted and Tur, just a couple of conversations here and there, where with like 5 or 6 lines of dialogue, they can communicate so much about this larger world, and they do that so much even with like some of the smaller recruits, where like I know that this is there's a much larger world at play here, but like the Empire is also much larger than us. I mean that like in a storytelling perspective. Like I feel like it does so much so quickly. But the thing that I was struck with most was the fact that they were able to do it and respect our time and respect our intelligence in ways that RPGs today just don't. At least a lot of them don't. And I was really impressed by that last time.
Yeah, the very beginning of the game is a little slow, but then from basically the boss fight against the Ant Queen, where Ted uses his death magic, from that point on, it is very action packed, and like major events happen town to town. There's not like a filler episode here, unless you use your own time traipsing around trying to recruit everyone you can,
Which you do. At least I do.
which is encouraged for
Yeah.
sure. After you're made into a fugitive in your own hometown, a mysterious gentleman named Victor helps you escape Gregminster. And Victor's with the Liberation Army, and from the get-go is trying to convince you to join the Liberation Army as well. You meet the Liberation Army's Joan of Arc of sorts, whose name is Odessa Silverberg, and
It's such a great name.
yeah, and the other leaders in the Liberation Army, Flick, and what is the guy's name?
Humphrey, maybe?
Humphrey, and a guy starts with G. Is it Gonzalez? No,
Talking about Sanchez?
Sanchez. That's it. Yeah, yeah. He make you. Well, I don't know. He looks a little bit like Sancho from Dragon Quest V, or maybe
It's
I'm just.
funny because Sancho is actually in this game.
Oh, there's a Sancho as well.
Well, sort of. This isn't a spoiler. No, basically,
Yeah, very late.
very late in the game. Yeah, you'll see.
Okay.
You'll get
You'll
the
run into a Don Quixote of sorts.
yes and
Oh,
Sancho.
really? Oh, okay. So, and Don Quixote
It's
and
not
Sancho
even of
Panza.
sort, Zach. It is Don Quixote.
Is there a boss fight against a windmill? Because I welcome it.
That would be fun, but no.
All right. Well, whether or not there are any men from La Mancha later in this game, did not exactly understand what Zach and John were referring to, but I know that there's at least 50 more characters for me to meet and recruit. Because again, where we're talking about now, the recruiting has barely started. Like after meeting Odessa, Odessa is very committed to the cause. The empire is corrupt. There needs to be new leadership, and she wants to found a new nation. Free from the emperor's grip, and Windy, the clearly evil witch advisor of his. Um, and after
Page.
yeah, and after you sort of run some errands for Odessa and explore the world nearby a little bit, things go very badly. The Empire discovers their hidden base in the sewers of one town. Odessa's killed trying to save a child that was caught in the crossfire, and in one of many heartbreaking small moments, like begs you to throw her body in the sewer so it's not discovered, and the people won't lose the will to fight if they've learned that she's been killed. Which is like a sort of dark moment for being so early in this game. But Tyr acquiesces, becomes the new leader of the Liberation Army, and sort of and again on Odessa's prompting, goes conveniently across one border to the next town order where her brother Matthew lives. And I think the game is like sometimes calls him a doctor, sometimes calls him a tactician.
I think it's a translation issue. Like I noticed that this last time too. I was like, why is
There's
he always referred to as the doctor? I mean, like a term
He's a
like
doctor
Doctor
of
Who
war.
here.
He's a
Yeah.
doctor of war.
I think he's probably just addressed as sensei, which can mean doctor or teacher or a term of respect in a
Yeah,
number
that
of
would make sense.
of disciplines. So one weakness to this game is I think the translation's a little weak. Like
Oh, for sure.
there's inconsistent naming and grammatical errors and odd word choices everywhere. That I think the story still communicates its drama and its events well enough, but like it sort of feels dated, like localization wasn't good yet in 1996. Which a translation this bad would not fly in the 2020s. It would be mocked in social media, and our friends who are professional game localizers that used to work at RPG Fan would lament not being able to work on this kind of game.
Yeah, I mean, actually, speaking of that, there's a former staffer who's playing it right now, I think, in like the original Japanese, and he just keeps talking about how amazing the original Japanese is, and I'm like, oh, I wish we had that localization. Would you
there's
like
any
to do that,
translation
Stephen?
patches, retranslation patches for it.
I've looked into that and I haven't found any.
I think there probably are. They probably are out there. Maybe for the PSP re-releases or something. But but this translation is a little weak. And if Suikoden 1 and 2 were ever to be repackaged or remade, I would be excited for a new translation. Like I said, it's not dumbing down how good this game is necessarily. But I bet like if there was a more faithful or at least a more faithful is the wrong word. If this game had a more
Better,
yeah, sure. Just a
a
better
more better translation.
if this game had a better translation, I think the experience would be enhanced, but it's already good and like the plot itself is still good. But when you meet Dr. Matthew Tactician Sensei, it takes some convincing, but he even though he's tired of seeing just the horrors of war and people being sent to their deaths, he realizes that the better choice is to take part and have the outcome steered toward justice rather than allow suffering to happen around him. And he becomes your army's official tactician, and maybe not quite as diabolically as Shu does in Suikoden 2, but
Right.
definitely shapes the direction of your army and the choices you make.
I mean,
I think he's the best written character in the game. I think his constant struggle against needing to fight and put basically all of these deaths on his head when he dreads it, and this is something he left. No spoilers, but he left another group to avoid. His struggle is genuinely touching and is woven throughout the game. I think he's the best written character in the game in his arc.
I actually, I mean, I generally agree. I think Matthew is a great character. We all know I love the tacticians in Suikoden, but it actually gets to a slight criticism I have of this game in that they always like the way you recruit Matthew is like, oh, the Empire comes in and they do something horrible, like immediately when you try to recruit him, and so frequently that happens throughout this game. Like it has to touch them personally before they make that decision, and like in ways that make it like very obvious, like, all right, like obviously you have to join us now. Whereas in other Suikoden games, I feel like they deal more in shades of gray and more in like the characters being characters. Whereas here, I feel like it's always like, oh, you mess with something personal to me. This happens with LaPont, which we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, no, Lapont
Um,
is right after Matthew, and
right.
you have this big scheme to try and get Lapont to join you because Matthew's like Lapont's a former commander and a great warrior. He'd be perfect for our
And
cause.
it's only when Commander Craze goes after his wife that like, oh, okay, now I will fight the Empire. And I feel like it's realistic, I guess. Like I feel like that's the way most people think. Unless it like touches them personally, they don't care.
I, I
Even
think
in
I think what we are euphemistically calling an economy of story uh, is responsible for that. There's not a lot of room for gray in economy of stories. The very short like stories that really move real quick generally tend to be black and white. And that's not a criticism of the game. It's just the time it was created and the fact that there's a lot to get through.
And I mean, it's very naked with Lapont, like Zach said. You have this big scheme to break into Lapont's house and steal his ceremonial sword, and trade the sword for Lapont's cooperation. Like eventually, you realize like, yeah, we're sorry, we're not really thieves. Here's your sword back, and then Lapont doesn't is unwilling to join you until uh they have his wife at knife point, basically. And at which point him and his wife do join you, and you can find their philandering son one town over. And their son is one of the best characters in Suikoden 2, ironically.
he's not quite as broken here, unfortunately.
He seems like a normal
Yeah.
normal frontline guy now, while in Suikoden 2 he's like one of the top 2 or 3 characters in the game.
Yep. And Killy both destroy. Yeah, I mean, I agree with your point, Jono, that it's about economy of storytelling, but I also think that it, and I hate to talk about games comparatively, but like you can see them adding those shades, and it's not just so obvious. Like, hey, Empire bad. I tell you, Empire bad. Now let me go see. Oh, Empire bad. I will join you because Empire bad. I mean, like I feel like sometimes
Empire is very bad.
exactly. And I feel like occasionally I'm like, all right, I get it, especially because as Sollosi pointed out, like the LePont thing and the Matthew thing happened back to back, and I'm like, all right,
And
I
I
get
mean,
it.
what's the story bit after that is the Great Forest stuff, where
Yeah.
an elf goes to your doorstep begging you to save the elven village from the Empire. You head over there. The kobolds and elves and dwarves don't trust humans at all. They basically all kick you out or doubt you or hate you automatically. And but then after the Empire strikes back, haha, and wipes out
All right, good night, everyone.
yeah, wipes out one or two of those villages, then you'll have a group of elves and kobolds agree to join your group. Like it's like no one doubts you until it's too late, and then you know you recruit your next group of characters and move on to the next story bit.
Yeah.
And it happens really quickly. Again, like that whole elves, dwarves, kobolds thing is maybe 2 or 3 short dungeons and 3 villages, and it takes place in, like, an hour, maybe another 90 minutes, when it would be, like, a 5-hour arc, I think, and if the game was made in the 2010s and not the 90s. So, I wonder if they had a limited time or budget with this game and really, really wanted to hit the points they wanted to hit of recruiting 108 characters and having and liberating a nation from an oppressive empire. Like they basically accomplished the biggest things they wanted to accomplish, but it all happens real fast because they were limited by time. Is I that's what this game feels rushed to me. I think part of it is that it's 1995, and part of it is that I like maybe they were trying to make it finish the game by the end of the fiscal.
Apparently, according to the wiki, it took about 2 years to develop, which means they were working off a PlayStation development kit without an actual, probably like final unit of PlayStation because it was released in the end of '94 in Japan. So it was probably a combination of factors. It was probably time crunch around the end, and the fact that they were developing a game for a system that wasn't really released yet and was brand new, so they didn't really know what it could do. Um, a real I think what they did is quite remarkable considering the restraints they were under, or the constraints they were under.
Yeah, that is true. But I mean, examining it from a vacuum, uh, Suikoden 2 is obviously better in every way. It's
It's a perfect sequel.
it's an incredible sequel. And the pace is a little bit more relaxed, and they allow different characters and different storylines to marinate a little bit more, and it doesn't seem like the moment to moment parts of the plot are just feel less jarring in Suikoden 2, even though a whole lot of stuff happens, and the amount of drama is
Yep.
just as high, if not higher, in Suikoden 2. But
I would say
like
higher, and a lot of shades of gray in Suikoden 2 too. While we were talking about shades of gray and like that's the game, really.
yeah, I mean there are a couple there are some groups of people in Suikoden 2 that are, I would say, obviously evil, and people
Yes,
that are trying to whose intentions are always good, but the outcomes in Suikoden 2 are do have shades of gray, and like even good people doing the right thing, like inflicting casual maybe not atrocities, but causing others to suffer is part of Suikoden 2. That's like both Suikoden 1 and 2 are about the horrors of war to a degree, and trying to like tell a fantasy story in uh like with a war sensitive and political connotation that I think is successful in both of those games. But Suikoden 2 did it better, and I think that's probably because a combination of they sort of knew how to develop for the PlayStation at that time, even though the games feel almost the same,
Mhm.
they're done in a similar or the same engine. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of think of this game and Suikoden 2 as like two sides of the same coin. And I agree with you. Of course, Suikoden 2 is a better game. Like, Suikoden 2 is better than all the games. But one
period.
thing that
Every game.
I agree.
uh,
Thank you for saying it, Jono.
listen to our PS1 episode from a couple years ago, and you'll understand.
Yeah, but I think that one of the things that people don't talk about a lot with this game is the personal nature. We've already sort of gone through those moments of what is personal for Tur in a way that even for Ryu, and it touches him, but like in like sort of like a historical way in Suikoden 2. But here, it's like literally your dad is one of the 5 great generals of the Scarlet Moon Empire, and you become the leader of the army that moves against him. And I think that they do a great job of, in a very short span of time, as we've been talking about, convincing you that he would do that, but also showing you the loss that he will experience as a result. Because we haven't talked about the fact that Pawn betrays you, then he comes back over the course of this. Like you have some personal loss that you deal with over this, and I think that the personal element of Suikoden 1 might be, outside of maybe Suikoden 5, like as strong as it gets in this series, and I think that that makes it like sort of hum more for me. And even all the stuff with Ted, and we don't know what's going to happen to Ted at this point in the narrative.
Yeah,
Like it all,
I haven't met my father yet, other than the opening scenes of the game, and,
right.
and I know that clash is coming,
Yeah.
and Pan betrays you to the Empire right near the beginning because he's loyal to your dad and the Empire, but then comes back and betrays the Empire to help you, and
Mhm.
and rejoins, and so you know he's troubled by everything going on.
Right. And all that interpersonal like, sort of tension. Like I feel like it makes even more sense here than it does in the Suikoden 2. Suikoden 2, of course, is richer, but I think that the story here, especially if it was given 5 more hours to breathe, is phenomenal and could be even better. And the fact that it's still touching, and to me, I still have that connection with the character, unlike Cory. In that period of time, I think is kind of remarkable.
But it's not just Pan. The thing is, Pan almost feels like a throwaway monk character, except for this betrayal thing that happens over 2 scenes.
Mhm.
And Valeria, who I mentioned before, is probably my favorite minor character in the game so far. She was an Imperial soldier that, when they found out the Imperial plot that she was going to be a part of, betrays them and tries to save the Elven and Kobold kingdoms, but she's locked up for being a traitorous human. And Kirkus, the elf that led you to the Kobold and Elven village, is the only elf that is is willing to risk trusting humans to save them from this. So and both of them have a surprising struggle. And then the I forget his name because I only I only met him like an hour before recording. But the kobold that joins you near the end of those quests, um, is grieving because he thinks his village was wiped out, and is completely unable to trust humans until you protect him from Imperial soldiers. So there's just a lot of minor personal tragedies happening to characters that seem minor or throwaway that endears you to them a little bit more closely. It's like you're playing a Fire Emblem game that has 50 characters in it, and you don't really get to know those characters until you hear them in support side conversations. But Suikoden 1 and 2, but we're playing 1, so let's talk about that one, I guess. Like, by getting these brief anecdotes in the story and going back to base and talking to the characters you've recruited and seeing who else they've made friends with or what they're saying at base, it like endears you to dozens of characters with remarkable ease. So it's like it would be easy to have 108 complete throwaway characters, but they do a good job of making that 108 feel feel cozier. Like you're closer to these characters than a worse written game would do. Do you
Mhm.
feel where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I do. It's very, and it also helps that you have to recruit them in a variety of different ways. Like you really need to figure it out, and that's part of their story. Whether or not that's like bring them, like I think one of my favorite bit. This is this isn't a spoiler for story, but it's a bit of a spoiler to how to recruit someone. It's like if you
Oh,
want to,
that doesn't count as a spoiler. Go ahead,
yeah,
hit me.
if you want to collect the blacksmiths, you need to make sure that you have all of the blacksmiths like in your party. And it's like they're almost like a team. I guess they were all students of the same person. Which to me, even though you just use them to upgrade your weapons, the fact that that's how you recruit them makes them seem more real to me. Or the fact that in some cases you need to be frustratingly good at gambling to get people to join you.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I can't believe I got Taiho and Suikoden 2 on the very first hand that I played, and then to recruit the second gambler guy in Suikoden 1, it took me I think 5 or 6 resets. And then I didn't even win by beating him. He beat himself by throwing the instant lose hand. So it's it can be frustrating when some things are left to chance. I know that for uh I've been following a non-spoiler recruitment guide so I don't miss any of the 108 stars. And one of them told me that one character entry told me that you may need to reset this duel because there's a high chance a certain character dies.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you should be
you know what I'm referring
all
to?
those characters you started with at the beginning. Make sure that you have them at least at level 30 and totally sharpen.
Got it. Okay,
Give me that guide, please.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll keep Gremio, Pon, Cleo, and Tyr, of course, well sharpened. Did I forget anyone? No, that's it.
That's
That's the
them.
crew.
You mentioned the one you
Ed's
need.
toast by
So.
then.
Yeah. And true, I genuinely like them as party members, perhaps other than Gremio, who again is Mr. Average or below average.
It's a
Yeah.
perfectly nice character though, like
Yeah,
kind
very
of
nice.
one-minded, like
I
likes
disliked
master.
Gremio maybe less than ever this time, but man, every single time I play this game, I'm like, oh my god, Gremio, go away.
Yep.
My problem isn't with him as a character. My problem is him always being in my party when I have a castle
young
with
master.
a castle full of like 30 characters that I would rather have instead of him.
He cares about young master and he cares about stew, and that's it.
Yeah, he cares about what's about young master and that dinner service is perfect.
Yes.
But Zach and Jono, Cory and I have not played this game before. Can you tell us either one character or one scenario from the second half of the game that you sort of can't wait for a reaction to or are looking forward to re-experiencing?
That's easy. When you do in fact meet Tio McDole again on the battlefield, it's phenomenal sequence. There's so much good stuff. The very last sequence of the game,
You just stole mine.
is also really good. I'm sorry. I will
That's
stop
okay.
talking. You
No,
talk
it's
about the
cool.
last sequence of the game.
No, that was it. Like the last sequence of the game. The again, we can't really. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's some really good character stuff that goes on in the last few minutes of the game. That I think both of you will really enjoy. A lot of payoffs.
I mean, and it gets to everything that Suikoden is.
Yeah.
Over the course of the series about being about personal passions and people making mistakes.
Yeah.
And I feel like, early on, and at this point, I think that you've cleared Quanda at this point. Sollosi,
Yeah,
is that right?
I just beat Quanda like 20 minutes before recording.
And they do some things with Quanda and some of the early generals that I think I'm like, oh, that's not very Suikoden because there's some rune on their arm that makes them act crazy. But some of the later ones, no, that they're acting of their own volition, and I think that when you see some of that playing out, I'm like, all right, this is what this series is about, and it captures it like so well, so early. Like I'm like, this game is amazing. I can't wait for 100 Heroes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my advice for both of you, and you'll both be looking at a guide, so it's probably not going to be a problem. But if you're ever given the option to kill anyone, except for one character, always never kill them.
Yeah, I mean, when you after you defeat Quanda, and
there's one character who it just feels real good to kill, though.
Yeah, it's fair.
Is it Gremio?
That's funny for so many reasons.
I mean, I think it might be Craze because that guy,
yes,
that guy's a jerk. Although I did spare him after he almost killed Lapante's wife. But when after you defeat Wanda, and the rune that was making him crazy disappears, he sort of realizes everything he's done and offers his head to you. He's like, look, I see what's happened here. Go ahead and execute me. But I think it's still a very Suikoden moment to spare him and tell him, no, instead of me killing you, you're going to join our army, and that's going to be how you repent. Like that kind of attitude feels very, Chinese Japanese melodrama Suikoden
that's fair.
Like like a Chinese general playing violin in a tower, kind of moment that I associate with that the brand of literature that that water margin is. So I'm looking forward to all of this. I can't wait to see the rest of the wacky crew that that joined. I know there's going to be at you know, I'm pretty sure that I'm about to do the part of the story with Flick in it, and I know that that Flicker is the ultimate power couple of Suikoden.
That's a true story.
So I'm looking forward to getting to know Flick in the next story arc. I haven't done it yet, but I saw that he's in the command room of my castle right when right before I saved.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I'm just looking forward to meeting the rest of the 108.
Yeah.
And
So you're kind of getting the same experience that I got with Yakuza, with me playing Yakuza Kiwame first and then going back to Zero. It's you're kind of getting that same experience where you're like seeing where they end up and now you're seeing where they came from.
yeah, for me playing Suikoden 2 before 1 is a little bit like that, and it's even though I see the value in playing them in the intended order, I don't feel bad about missing out before because again, I don't I care less about spoilers than just about anyone else that I know because I think that there's a part of it is that the journey is more important than the destination, but also there's value in seeing your expectations fulfilled rather than always having them to rather than always needing to be surprised. So even though I'm not surprised by seeing familiar faces this weekend in one, it's still great to see them, and I'm looking forward to playing. And Cory, I think you're enjoying this about as much as I am. So you're looking forward to how this turns out as well.
Yeah, very much. Kind of want to see. We talked a lot about the story not being super gray, and I was kind of hoping that y'all were going to say that it got more nuance. So I'm a little bit disappointed that it doesn't sound like it does. But I'm really enjoying it. I haven't even gotten to any point in the game where I'm playing with all the mechanics. Like I still haven't done any duels or any of I think the larger field battles that I've read about.
Yeah,
Um,
I just did the very first two one of those each. So you're pretty close.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that and just kind of seeing what foundation of the series is. I think this is the first series I've played, like first retro series I've played in a long time, where I feel pretty committed to playing other entries as well. Like y'all are talking about Suikoden 2. I really want to see what that's about.
Again,
It's real good.
I was not a Suikoden 2 doubter. I was a Suikoden 2 avoider for many years because again, it's one of the rarest, most expensive PS1 RPGs. And then when it came out on PSN, I had already started the podcast and we sort of planned on doing Suikoden 2 for a while, then finally did it. So I was sort of saving Suikoden 2 for the right occasion. And when I finally got to it, it's like, oh, this is one of the best games ever made. Holy moly. And Suikoden 1 is like a valuable, worthy prequel to Suikoden 2. So Cory, and we're only in part 1 of the Suikoden 1 podcast, but I urge you to play Suikoden 2 at a later date.
At
Yeah,
some
I'm
point in the future.
pretty sure it's going to happen just based on how much I'm enjoying this one already.
But we're not going to do a third Suikoden 2 podcast. I think maybe I'll want to play Suikoden 2 in a couple months, and we can revisit that one. I'm
That was
maybe
literally the month before I joined RPG Fan.
maybe I'm not against it, but we'll save that. We'll save the sequel implications for part 2. Thank you so much, Cory, Jono, and Zach for discussing Suikoden 1 with me. Again, I'm only about 8 hours in, but it's going to be no trouble at all for me to finish this one. I'm definitely committed. I'm definitely excited, and we can get into the second half of Suikoden 2. I'm sorry, second half of Suikoden 1 in part 2 of our podcast next week. But what's coming up after more Suikoden next week? We have the month of July planned out. We're going to do 2 episodes on Tales of Exilia, the PlayStation 3 Tales of game that sort of brought the two Tales teams into one. So I'm interested to finally get around to playing that game that another one that I've been ignoring or avoiding for 10 years. And we're also doing an episode on video game accessibility, which is a topic that is near and dear to a number of the hearts at RPG Fan. I'm not sure if that's going to be the first or second episode in July. It depends on people's schedules, but please look forward to that. And also, I am in the midst of writing another quiz show episode, so that is probably going to happen in July, in the first or second week of July, unless I really hit writer's block on those quiz questions.
I
So
look forward to losing again.
we'll see.
Spectacularly on my side.
So please look forward to Gaming Accessibility, a new quiz show, and Tales of Exilia next month. But if you want to reach out to us listeners as a podcast, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also go to rpgfan.com's message boards, our Facebook page, our Discord server, our YouTube channel, our Twitch channel, something going on basically every night on Twitch. And a lot of the content we make for the website will have a video component or companion on YouTube. There are also 3 other fine podcasts on rpgfan.com. There's Random Encounter every 2 weeks, mostly about randomness, mostly hosted by you, John.
Yeah, next episode's going to be a big one. We're going to be talking about all of the news announced at Not E3.
That's right. The week of June 6th through 13th is going to be probably the biggest news week of the year for video games. We're in that week right now, recording this episode a little bit early. So by the time, well, I should say before this episode comes out, we will have that Random Encounter episode all about the biggest gaming news of the biggest gaming news week. But that's not the only podcast we have on our RPG Fan. There's also Rhythm Encounter every other 2 weeks, and that's mostly about RPG music. And in addition to Random Rhythm and Retro, there is Phoenix Edge, a podcast mostly about current events, currently on hiatus. Hopefully, Hat and Eric and the guys on Phoenix Edge come back soon. But you can review Retro Encounter, Random Encounter, Rhythm Encounter, or Phoenix Edge on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, whatever podcast service you use. Please leave feedback. We love feedback. 5 stars, 5 stars. But if you want to give a 5-star review to any of the panelists here as individuals, how do we do so? Let's tell them, starting with you, Zach.
You can email me, zachw@rpgfan.com, or you can find me on RPG Fans Discord at zachw.
Now, Cory.
You could email me at coryt@rpgfan, or you can find me on Twitter at morecoffee88.
More spelled MOAR, because when you need more coffee, that's how you pronounce more.
More
Exactly
coffee.
right.
And Jono, how can listeners find you?
You can send me an email to jlogan@rpgfan.com, or you can find me on Twitter at jono_Logan.
And listeners, maybe you've heard me say this over 200 times. I'm most easy to find on Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoca for Dogs at other times, and on RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. So I have probably around 70 to 75 more characters to recruit before we reconvene, because if I don't get to all 108, I'll really feel bad.
That's a true story in this game, in particular.
I mean, I don't know what the end game change is for Suikoden 1 for getting all 108, but I know what it is for Suikoden 2, and if it's anything like that, I agree, Zach. Listeners,
a lot like that.
oh boy,
Yeah.
oh no.
I gotta be honest though. I mean, without spoiling anything, for Cory, maybe just go for 106. Don't find the last one. I think you'll like it better actually, given a lot of what you said on this podcast.
I don't know. Listeners, well, okay, I do know a little bit, but listeners, thank you. Good night and good luck.